Hey everyone, Zeph and Moses here, and today we are doing a full setup of the ATEM 2ME Constellation Switcher, as well as the advanced 1ME control panel that I use to control this switcher. I'm going to walk you through all of the setup that I do in a typical live stream, and while it typically would face out this way, I'm going to do my best to reverse it so that I can show you all of the equipment that you would see set up on my tech table. I'll be sure to link in the description down below to all of the equipment that's mentioned here today. And as always, if you have questions on this or you're curious about a piece of gear that I put up on this table, please leave a comment down below this video and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. So let's dive into this live streaming switcher setup. What would an ATEM 2ME Constellation be used for as opposed to the ATEM SDI Extreme ISO as you may have seen me use in my other videos? The biggest thing is the ATEM 2ME has two MEs, or two mix effects. That allows me to create two completely independent shows. A great way to use this is if you need to switch one show that's going to projector screens, but a second show that's going to the actual live stream audience. A second way that we might use this is for one show to go to projector screens, but a separate show that can go to the downstage monitors, also known as the confidence monitors. You see, the 2ME has multiple inputs. In fact, it has 20 inputs. And output wise, we've got plenty. We have 12. So in this video, we're gonna dive right in. We're gonna show you how we use it, and I'm gonna set it up right here. I'll be right back with the first item, and that is the ATEM 2ME Constellation Switcher. Here we have an SKB rack case, and this rack case has 6 rack units available. I've put my ATEM 2ME Constellation in here. Let me open it up and show you what else is inside. Okay, so on the back side of this rack case, you're gonna see at the very top an exhaust fan. This allows me to keep the rack cool. It's got a thermal probe that's tucked away inside the rack case, and that'll tell me what the temperature is inside the unit. It also has some settings, so I can increase or decrease the fan speed based on the temperature inside the unit. Next up down the line is a TP-Link unmanaged switch. This is a gigabit unmanaged switch, and it is model SG1008MP. This switch is a PoE switch, meaning it provides power over Ethernet. That allows me to power the hyperdecks that are also in this unit. You'll see them on the front side, and I also use this to power my PTZ cameras when I plug them in. Now below that, we have access to everything else. Basically the rear connections to the ATEM 2ME Constellation, a power cord which comes out and powers the entire unit, and I also have a USB-C cable that's tucked away in the back here. There's a little vent rack unit that's just attached here, and this is mostly to keep all the cables sitting inside. So it just has some holes in it for airflow, but this is mostly just helping me keep everything in the unit here. So these are the two only cables that are gonna come out the back of the unit, one for power, one for connecting to a computer. Let's go ahead and flip this around to the front. Alrighty, so on the front of this case, you will see, first and foremost, we have a dual monitor setup. These monitors are from Feel World, and what I like the most about them is they have a 3.5mm headphone jack. So if I'm trying to monitor the audio coming out of the ATEM, I can just plug my headphones directly into these monitors. These are taking an output from the Multiview of the ATEM. One little trick that I learned though was the ATEM has separate outputs for Multiview. There's 2 of them. Because there's 2 MEs, you get output 1 and output 2. That way you see the Multiview 1 for ME1 and Multiview 2 for ME2. You can customize that, send anything any which way. But basically you get 2 Multiviews. The problem is those Multiviews cannot be output over any of the other 12 outputs unless you do my little trick and you loop it. So what I did was I took the 2 SDI outputs on the back of this, and I took a short SDI cable, maybe 6 to 12 inches, and I took the Multiview 1 output and I took it into input 1 on the ATEM, and I took Multiview output 2 and I put it into input number 2 on the ATEM. So while I will be taking up 2 of my inputs already, that still allows me to route the Multiview outputs to any of my other outputs, meaning I still have a full 12 outputs plus the 2 Multiviews, right? So the 2 Multiviews are taken, but I have the 12 outputs that I can send anything to. So now I can send my Multiview outs to 1 through 12. 1 and 2 right now are reserved reserved for monitors 1 and 2. So that means that outputs 1 and 2 of the ATEM are feeding this monitor 1 and this monitor 2. So if you need all of those inputs and outputs, you're gonna run into a little bit of a problem trying to do that. But for me, it's very rare that I have 20 items plugged into this thing and need to have any more than 10 to 12 outputs from this. So that's just my little trick that I use in the live streaming setups that I have. Next, below the dual monitors is the actual ATEM Constellation 2ME itself. This is the rack panel where you can go ahead and control it. You can go into the settings. You could even do some switching from here. It's not recommended because you can't really adjust a whole lot else, but at least being able to access this to see the program feed coming through, and if you need to check like the IP address settings or anything like that, you can do that from here. Below that, we have two hyperdecks that I use mostly for recording. So I might record the program feed and then maybe a backup recording feed, or maybe I'll record the program feed on hyperdeck 1, but I'll do a clean feed output to number 2. That allows me to record without the keyer so that we don't see things like lower thirds, and we just have a good copy of the raw footage without any graphics that have been overlaid on top of the program feed. Last but not least, down here is our power conditioner, and this is what gives me one power plug or one power switch to turn on the entire rack unit itself. One little tip that I have is to get yourself a power conditioner that actually has a power outlet that's on it. That way you can plug in something like your phone to charge or any other item like maybe your laptop when it's sitting in front of this unit. So this is my rack case. I'm gonna slide it off a little bit to the side. We'll get this plugged into power. Next thing that we wanna get out is our multi-view monitor, because I have a bigger monitor than these little ones, and we're gonna get out the ATEM 1ME advanced control panel. So let me go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so the ATEM advanced control panel, I usually keep it in this Pelican vault case. This is their biggest vault case that they make currently, and this allows me to protect it because it's an expensive piece of gear, and I want to make sure that it won't take a beating when it's on the road with me. Let's go ahead and get this open. Inside, you'll see the ATEM advanced control panel, and I went ahead and cut out this foam, this pick and plug foam, to fit that panel and make sure that it stays protected. So here's the panel itself. This panel can be powered over Ethernet, or potentially what you could do is just plug in AC power to this using a standard cable. So I'm gonna use that cable today. And we'll plug this into the back of the unit. Next thing we need to do is this control panel needs to be able to talk to the ATEM itself. How do we do that? Well, the ATEM is plugged into the switch that's in the back of this using an Ethernet cable. And if we plug this into that switch as well, then they can start to talk to each other. All you have to do is go into the settings and tell the control panel what the IP address is of the ATEM switcher. Next, I'm gonna get the multi-view monitor and a computer. All right, so this is my 21.5-inch monitor. It's a broadcast monitor, and it comes in this protective case. That allows me to make sure that when I'm on the road and all my cases are piled into a car, nothing's going to get damaged. So let me go ahead and get this case opened up, and you'll see our monitor inside. I'm gonna remove the front and the back as well. And note that the back has a hinged panel, but it comes off the hinges, so you can just slide it right off and take it away. One of the things that I'll usually do is I'll keep the power cord in the back of the monitor so I don't lose it, but you might want to go ahead and either tape it down inside there or add some extra foam because it can rock around when you're in the car. Make sure that this doesn't go rocking around inside and damaging the monitor. So from here, we have our core ingredients to the live stream. I still need a computer, an encoder, and some cables. Let me go ahead and grab those. First thing is going to be one SDI cable. This is going to allow me to connect the ATEM switcher to the multi-view monitor. Since my outputs 1 and 2 are already taken for the multi-view, I can go ahead and plug this into output number 3. Remember, like I mentioned at the beginning, outputs 1 and 2 are sending the feed to monitors 1 and 2 on here. So if I want that duplicated, I need to pass it along to this monitor using output number 3 or the loop outs on the back of these two monitors. Okay, so I've got my encoder here. This is the Magewell Ultra Encode AIO encoder. This is one of my favorite encoders that I like to use, and this needs an SDI output from the ATEM Constellation. Since 1 and 2 are used for the monitors 1 and 2 down here, and output number 3 is used for the Multiview, I'm going to use output number 4 to send our program feed to this encoder. I can either plug the encoder into the power outlet on the front of this, or I have a power strip on the floor that I usually use to connect all of these. Okay, so now it's time to power everything on, and then lastly, I'll add in my computer, and then of course we'll talk a little bit about cameras, inputs, and outputs. So to power this thing on, all we have to do is hit the power switch that's right down here. This is our power for the entire unit. Give that a moment to power up. Then we're gonna power on our encoder. Then we're gonna go ahead and power on our monitor. Now, because I've already told this controller what the IP address is of my ATEM, and that IP address doesn't change because it's always plugged into the same switch, they're gonna connect almost immediately as soon as things turn on. That's going to allow me to control it right away, but I'd still have to go into the ATEM software control on my computer in order to change all the inputs and outputs, the labeling, the multi-view settings, everything else. Now, as you can see over here on my dual monitors, I have 2 different outputs. They are outputs 1 and output 2 from the ATEM Constellation. Right now you're just seeing some of the old settings and things that I had on here from the last live stream, but I can customize all of that once I open up my laptop. So let's go ahead and get our laptop opened up, connected, and we're going to use the USB-C cable that's plugged into the back of the ATEM so that we can use the software control. Now, when you connect the computer, the USB-C cable should allow you to go right into the software control. As you can see with this one, it's not connected and not seeing it, and typically that only happens when 1, you use a power-only USB-C cable, or 2, the ATEM is running a newer version of the software control and you need to update the laptop to make sure that it does the same. Now that I have the most recent and up-to-date ATEM software control on the computer, it's very easy to see that everything is connected and talking. Now this is the last part where we would go ahead and connect our cameras, our computers, and everything else. For the sake of time and letting you know that you can simply go watch other videos where I show how to do that, we're going to just talk based around this setup here and changing this. But the assumption is that you can go ahead and plug any SDI connection into the back of this ATEM. If you're trying to plug in a laptop, I highly recommend getting a Decimator MDHX, which allows for scaling and conversion from HDMI to SDI so that you can get your computers into the back of this switcher. Let me jump over to the ATEM software control here and modify my multi-view to fix it, since last time it looks like I was outputting a couple of things to different screens. So now you can see I adjusted my output so that Multiview monitor number 1 is going to here, as well as my main Multiview monitor, and Multiview monitor number 2 is going to this screen. If I had additional screens, I could send Multiview 2 to there as well. The beauty of this controller is that I can go ahead and actually switch between ME1 or ME2, and you can see here it actually changes my controls based on ME1 and ME2. So that allows me to switch to completely independent shows, and I really love using this switcher for those larger live events where I need to send feeds to multiple screens as well as into a live stream. As you can see, our encoder is all set up and ready to receive a feed. We'd simply have to plug the encoder using an Ethernet cable into our internet connection that's on site. Again, I'll repeat, the reason why I like to use external encoders is it takes a lot of the heavy lifting off of the switcher and gives me one device that if it's not working, I could always swap it out and get another. If the switcher froze up or something wasn't working, I can easily reroute and send an SDI cable into this encoder and I wouldn't lose my entire stream. So I'm always thinking about backups and how to navigate any trouble or issues that might come up in the event of a live stream failure. Now, I don't want to say that because I don't want to jinx it, so knock on wood, it typically is not occurring very often, but it does happen and you just want to be prepared for anything and everything. If I were doing video playback, similar to my other ATEM setups, I would use another laptop with an Ultra Studio monitor that allows me to take a Thunderbolt connection out of the MacBook Pro and convert it to SDI or HDMI to go into the switcher. My favorite video playback software is MIDI, and you've seen me use it in other videos, and that's what I would use to send the feed into here. Last thing I want to talk about is audio. So the back of the Constellation 2ME switcher has 2 1/4-inch audio inputs, but what you can do is you can get an adapter from 1/4-inch to XLR, since most audio companies are going to supply you with an SDI cable. Let me show you what that looks like. So it's a very simple adapter. It looks just like this. It's got 1/4-inch on one side and XLR female on the other side, and I plug 2 of these into the back of the switcher since I know that most of the time I'm going to be receiving an XLR feed. Anytime that I'm live streaming with this switcher, I'm always bringing an audio person as the dedicated audio person. It should not be my job to monitor all the audio levels for each person to mic people up while I'm in the middle of switching a live stream. It's also a way that I can start to build out my crew and start to delegate certain tasks so that I can make sure and focus on the live stream and make sure that everything goes off in a really calm, cool, collected manner. So by outsourcing certain aspects of the live stream, such as audio, it allows me to take one more thing off my plate to make a successful show. Let me go ahead and pop this right back in, and then we'll talk about some final thoughts. All in all, using an ATEM 2ME Constellation Switcher can be really valuable to doing those larger events. By having those 20 inputs, 12 outputs, and the multi-view outputs, and the ability to switch 2 independent shows on ME1 and ME2, also known as mix effects, it really allows me to create an all-inclusive experience for the client where everything just flows smoothly. I also really like the fact that I can call up my macros right here from this control panel, and if I go through all of those, there's a shift and a shift so that I can access even more macros. So for me, in a lot of my live streams, what I'm doing is programming those macros to bring in the lower thirds and certain graphics. I can also use this to set presets for different timers if I use the countdown timer feature, which, by the way, on output number 1 of this switcher, there is a countdown overlay that you can use. That's a great tool if you're trying to send a countdown to a confidence monitor to help keep the conference on time. Being able to send all of these inputs and outputs wherever you want is huge, and so when you're looking to graduate up from the ATEM SDI Extreme ISO to a switcher that has more inputs, more outputs, and more capability, this is a highly recommended ATEM switcher. All of this equipment that I've mentioned here is going to be listed down in the description below, and if you're interested in purchasing one of these items, it greatly helps my YouTube channel at no additional cost to you. I really appreciate all the support in watching this video, and as always, if you have questions about this setup or anything that you might not have seen here in this setup, please let me know down in the comment section, give us a like and a subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.